welcome back. We are here with my sister on the podcast.
Yeah.
And we are talking about Muslims in America, and we had a previous episode before this that we talked about kind of growing up as Muslims, and so now we're kind of talking about more being female and Muslim, the double whammy being in this community.
Yeah.
So as a group, so being Muslims and female, it's difficult because growing up, you're kind of, there's so many things that are taboo, and so sometimes you're like you feel guilty being like a female, right? So we have to cover ourselves, right? Like
there's an expectation
if you have like your
to cover
period, right? Like you have to like sneak in your pads and your tampons, right? And it's like no one's supposed to know about it, and you're like, this is ridiculous.
I feel like that's true even outside of being Muslim, but
totally right. But like especially,
I mean, yeah,
being Muslim, right? Or like I remember during like Ramadan, like or Holy Month, like if you weren't fasting, right, and like if obviously you couldn't fast if you had your period, and so if there was a girl who like was eating. Like, someone would be like, oh, why aren't you fasting? Or if a guy asked, and you just be like, come on, you know why. Like, you couldn't just be like, I have my period, right? Like,
there was, like, no open dialogue.
Yeah, it was like a hush-hush.
Towards, like, being female.
Yeah, it was like a hush-hush kind of thing, and it was just weird. I mean, uncomfortable, and, like, that's kind of I would like to say as my experience, is you were just constantly felt uncomfortable being female and Muslim.
I think there's,
right?
like, right, how being female and Muslim within the Muslim community, and there's being female Muslim outside of the Muslim community,
right?
And just like, you know, in your day-to-day, you know, living amongst like non-Asian folks. Totally. The first, though, you know, being a like female and Muslim within the Muslim community, and you know, we have to, I feel like, move a little carefully in this conversation because I don't want to sell the stereotype that, you know, Islam promotes this like
completely
oppressive approach towards women.
Totally, it's not even right
because
no,
I think that you and I we our family has spoken about this many times, and we always say it's not, you know, we are Muslim and female, and we feel this kind of, I don't know quite how to describe it. It's not like, oh, we feel oppressed, but you definitely feel the lack of opportunity that you can pursue, and that's not even religion, that's a cultural patriarchy.
Totally. So
that is enforcing itself via the branches of religion. Totally. And I think that's how like a lot of Southeast Asian governments have operated. Yeah. And that is the guise that they have used. They have used religion as a tool to, you know, promote men in leadership and like power positions and sustain it.
Well, so this is the interesting part, right? So we grew up in what you would consider by Pakistani. So let's look at it more. There's two ways you can look at it, right? So in America, our family's very conservative. That's what they're considered. But if we were to go back to Pakistan, our family is considered extremely liberal, which is very interesting, right? It's a weird dynamic that we have. And so we consider our family and our parents pretty liberal, right?
Oh, they're pretty liberal.
But then when we compare them to like our friends' parents in high school, we'd be like, oh my god, they're so strict, right? Like we weren't allowed to date. We were in high school. We didn't drink.
We were.
You know, we were very. They were conservative people. You know,
conservative. Like they wouldn't let us dress in
a certain way.
Like
not even a certain way. We couldn't wear dresses.
We couldn't wear dresses. Like short legs.
Yeah, our legs had to be,
which is bizarre because like the older we got, the more like we showed off our skin.
It's not even like, you know, like scandalizing, like, but it's literally just like, you know, it's hot outside, I want to wear like some shorts. Like that was like not an option. Or like, but it's weird. So we kind of grew up in that kind of family, right? So,
and I think that that's just like growing up in that kind of family, I think, where it's like we're liberal with respect to the perspective of, you know, our family back in Pakistan, but we're extremely conservative in the eyes of non-Asian community.
Yeah.
But I think like, and the reason for that is because our parents had to, as immigrants, kind of understand like, all right, well, you know, our kids are born and raised in America, but we want them to have some still strong identity towards being Pakistani. But how are they supposed to abandon that and be successful in this country? So they even understand the push and pull that we experience, I think. And they just experience it at a far more intense rate.
Totally. I mean, because imagine for them, so they came here, right? And then obviously this society is so different from over there. So in Pakistan's not ruled by Sharia law, as you would say. It's not. There's a constitution and all this stuff. But growing up, in our parents' age, when they grew up there, it was very conservative. Oftentimes women would need sort of like a male escort, right? So their dad or their brother or their uncle or cousin or whomever, they would always go out with them. But women wouldn't leave the house necessarily if they didn't have to, right?
Yeah.
Women also were very obedient. So obedient in the sense where they were very respectful to the parents and that kind of thing. And so the difference, so when we talk about this, and so our parents kind of faces this whole dilemma when they came here that, hey, the society is not like Pakistan, but at the same time, like, they were also raised in a certain way where they couldn't erase certain traditions or certain values or morals that they hold high up.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of fuse the two, right? So raising us, like, my dad was not used to seeing women in shorts and dresses. That was something we were not supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And we just never could understand why. Like, it just, like, mentally...
that was our norm, and it wasn't theirs.
Right, and so we didn't understand what that... So, like, I'm sure, like, Baba, our dad, equated, like, that kind of, like, showing your legs to something else, and when we equate it to just, like, something else completely, too, right? So, so raising us, they did a great job, honestly, in being strict in certain areas, and I do think they were strict, for sure. They'll say they were liberal, but they were strict, and it helped us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they also let us be the people we wanted to be.
I think, like, they were strict when it came to, decision making, but the process of decision making was a very like judicial process in our home.
Oh, it was like a give and take,
yeah,
right?
It was never like we'd go
dialogue.
to our parents and be like, oh, can we, I don't know, whatever, can we go to
like a party, right?
Yeah, a party by ourselves.
And they were like, no, right? So they'd be like, so we present our argument, right?
Yeah, it would never be just like a straight answer from my like mom or dad.
Yeah.
It would always be a discussion. First and foremost, it was always an open dialogue. And I think that's why we can appreciate like how the decisions were made. Maybe we weren't always
agreeing
weren't like excited about the answer and the decision in and of itself, but
you understood where it came from and like how it was developed and like
yeah,
right, which helps like a 14-year-old understand, right? Like you'd like
because then you're just dogmatic, and I think like that is something that's problematic in organized religion to begin with. There's this very dogmatic approach, and I think that once you kind of allow the debate, the question and answer forum style with respect to like, why are we making these decisions? Why can't I dress that way?
Totally.
Why am I? And, my parents would always say, my mom in particular would always say like, there's a time and age for everything. Like we're just not letting you do it right now. Yeah. And the older we got, we were allowed.
Yeah, it became a time and age. Surprisingly, I thought that day would never come, but it did.
Yeah,
eventually.
And she throws that back in our face. She's like, "Look, see, I told you."
And you're like, okay. Cool, but yeah, so we were talking about this before. We grew up in a place where there was a pretty big Pakistani presence, which was pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, we had like our like white friends, you consider it, like, right, like your school friends, and then you had your like Pakistani friends.
Every like
brown kid. Actually,
and
no, not all of them. I know some people who like didn't have that kind of like the best of both
I feel
worlds.
like most did though. Maybe
True.
not all of them, but most brown kids or like Asian kids
had that
whatever
kind of experience.
had their white friends,
and then they're like
and
brown
then
friends,
their actual like brown friends, your brown crew.
Brown crew.
That's literally how it was. Like, I'm gonna go hang out with my white friends today. And the brown people are like, all right. Like, but I mean, how weird, because we're supposed to be raised in like, I don't know. Like, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's like, just even that divide that we have in our head growing up.
Yeah.
Of just like my white friends, my brown friends.
Mm-hmm.
But we're supposed to grow up in an age where you're like supposed to see everyone the same, and we
but
can't.
but if you think about it, like growing up, like we didn't
How weird.
consider it that way. But you know what it was? Because the brown friends, so this is kind of, to be specific, those brown friends like didn't go to school with us, right? So we had our school friends, and then we had...
Which were like white.
Right, and these brown friends were made through our parents' connections, right? So they were the kids
network,
of our parents' friends. And they were like our brown friends, right? So it wasn't necessarily like brown friends get together, right? And then white friends so it was kind of like school friends, and then like are not school friends. So like all those brown kids didn't necessarily go to the same schools we did. They all went to different schools in the city. And so and then we just happened to hang out on the weekends,
Yeah.
right? So that was cool. And it was cool growing up because then you can kind of compare about like your experiences. But it was funny because it was kind of unfortunate, right? So I remember even in school, in high school, we eventually we kind of broke off and had like a majority like Muslim friends, which is kind of weird how it happened that way. And as we got older, you do kind of gravitate towards like your own kind, and I do think so. Like, especially with other, like I have friends in who were different races, and that happened to them too. As I got older, and so because you have collective like experiences, right?
Yeah,
like feeling like an outsider, or the way your parents treat you,
I was mentioning
or
like
being raised,
sense of understanding.
Yeah, which was cool.
They get it.
Yeah. So
and you don't have to provide an explanation for it. Really at all.
Right? So the thing is, I remember, so as we were talking about the whole idea where our parents were pretty liberal, so we figured that out pretty quickly. Like, so when we would hang out with our brown friends, we were sort of on the liberal end of things, right?
So
the
liberal
our
spectrum.
Parents would let us have our guy friends over, where our other boxing friends would be like, what? Like, you guys are allowed to invite guys over? And it was like, well, yeah, it's not like we're gonna do anything, right? It's like, these are our friends who happen to be guys. And like, by allowing us to do that, our parents like made it normal in our heads that like, hey, you can have guy friends, right? Whereas I feel like sometimes the Pakistani parents are like, no guy friends. You just make it worse than it actually is, right? Totally. You're like making it such a weird taboo thing. And so eventually I think we had like, obviously we became more open-minded. And so I think when we all went to the same community college, right? And I think when we were in community college, that's when we were like our brightest and just very excited, because we were obviously trying to figure out what we wanted to do with our lives.
Yeah.
And we were just so open to learning new things. And so I remember, though, we were probably the most, like, I don't want to say combative, because that's not the right word, but, like, we had an answer for everything, and we were arguing all the time with just so many people, and not in a bad way, but we were always wanting to debate people, right? And so I remember in community college, a lot of these, like, Pakistani guys who were our friends, but they were just like, you guys are just too outspoken, right?
Yeah.
Which is, like, hilarious to me in hindsight, because I don't think that exists. But I remember they were like, you guys are, I'm sure, like,
because it's supposed
to marry you guys, but like, I don't think anyone would want that.
Because
like,
there is a gender role in the brown community, that women should be submissive, and then by virtue of us wanting to engage in any kind of a debate, or anything that even like looked like a debate was like the pure opposite of being submissive, and they were just like, that's not how women are supposed to behave.
Which is like, what? We're not supposed to have an opinion?
Which is weird, because at the dinner table, like every single night, me, you, our other sister, my mom, and my dad would always get into a debate about whatever the issue of the time was.
Yes.
And I think like we were like, what? But that's how we were. That was the community that we were raised in.
Also, is that we were raised in an all-female household, right? So we didn't have any brothers.
Yeah,
and
it
I
was
think
just
that's,
our dad.
Yeah, and I think that's
male.
an important thing, because a lot of our friends had like a brother, and it was weird because like their brother was raised differently than they were, right? So they had different rules set for them, which was like, what? I remember we would hear about that, and we just like could not relate.
Oh my god!
All of us
so many of my
were
friends with brothers that are brown say that like their parents are just have so much more like leeway with the brothers than they do with
the
daughters
stay out later. Yeah.
Which was like so bizarre, but I guess that's their parents just taking how they were raised and implementing it with their children, and not really.
Well, but like also it's kind of the whole mentality of how we were talking about in Pakistan, how like women are supposed to like be like sheltered and right. So like guys who grow up here Pakistani, they can have girlfriends, they can stay out later because nothing's gonna happen to them, but like the girls, they should be stay inside, they shouldn't be out late. Remember the whole thing was like what would Momo say? She was like, good girls don't stay out past like 10 o'clock or something like that. Growing up, she'd be like, good girls don't stay out past like 10 o'clock. It's translated into Urdu, but like I can't think of the phrase, which is like a thing. And so like it's just so funny to think about, where it's like that doesn't make any sense. I could be out at 10 o'clock in like the library, right, or whatever. And so I think when you tell somebody like, hey, like if you do this, you're inherently bad, right?
And I think like that, when you talk about like being female and Muslim, growing up in particular, our childhood is where we experience that conflict the most.
Yeah.
And I feel like as though as we've gotten older and we are, our generation and a generation of children of immigrants are growing older and their parents have been, in this country longer.
Right. And they're watching other people raise their kids too.
We're becoming, that conflict isn't as like,
apparent,
right? Strong.
Yeah.
Or just as strife, maybe, I don't know. And
right.
so the conflict has become like less and less, and there's been more like understanding, which is awesome, I think, between our parents and our relationship. But
right.
our childhood in particular was like, we grew up in a very young age, my parents were, far more conservative than they are even now.
Totally.
Like, I would consider my parents to be like far more liberal now relative to our years growing up.
Totally.
Like our childhood years.
Yeah.
And that's so like bizarre, but so I think like, yeah, being female and Muslim, like we felt that difference of like how, guys in Muslim communities were being raised in, and not only like how their parents raised them, but also their thoughts and experiences and how they would project that on us and saying that like, no, women really shouldn't have these intense personalities.
Because they were sort of like repeating what their parents had said, right, to them. And so like I remember, so Sarah obviously went to school on the East Coast, right? We grew up in California, and so that required Sarah to move cross country.
Yep.
And I remember that was like a big thing. Nobody would. So like, the big thing in this community also was the fact that girls, from graduating high school or transferring,
like
they would stay at home. So like the weird thing is, right? So you're actually supposed to live at home until you get married and move with your husband, right? That's
not like a hard and fast rule, but that is like a traditional thought.
Well, yeah, right. So, and like in their minds, growing up with their kids, and I think Mom and Baba probably thought about this too. We're like, oh, they're gonna move out when they eventually. I'm sure they thought of that.
Yeah,
right.
I don't think my parents like factored in what's gonna happen when we go off to college.
But like parents don't actually factor in like their kids' personalities growing up, right? So you figure out your kid when they like are in high school, and you're like, oh, like I'm sure Mom and Baba like saw us in high school, and they're like, oh God, they've gone out of here, right? Like,
so
like we were allowed to be whoever we wanted to be when we were younger. We did like the ridiculous things, and that developed into what we are now and the monsters that we are now. And so,
I would not call us monsters.
I think we're monsters in some people's
goddesses.
What is the beauty sign in the eye of the beholder?
Yeah.
But yeah, so then like going back to when you were going to go off to school. You were like one of the first in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so weird to say this, but like Sarah was one of the first ones to like
up and leave.
And people, I remember my mom's own sister was like, why send her across the country when she's literally gonna get married and just sit at home afterwards? Like, do you not?
No.
Yeah, she said that.
But it's like this is the type of
weird
like narrative
mentality.
though that like we are raised around
right.
as Muslims, and it's so normal to other Muslims to think that way. Like probably for our aunt that was like a normal thought.
She was like, why send your daughter across the country and get this expensive degree when she's just gonna end up at home afterwards married to some person? And it's like, oh my God, like a person with a really great degree can go so far in this, like she could be president if she wanted to, right? Mm-hmm. And like, so people like don't really realize that. And like when she said that to my mom, my mom was like, what? Like she was so confused. So I can't believe she said that. And like the funniest thing is she felt so right in what she was saying that, right? She was just like,
they don't understand that what they're saying is so extreme. Yeah. Neither parties do, right? They're really just like blown away by what the other person is saying. They're like, wait, how do you not understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And my mom's like, how do you not understand what I'm saying? And they get this weird like world where they're what they think is right and wrong and what someone should or shouldn't do are really quite reversed.
Right, but so the thing is also is interesting, like I know a lot of people always say like when they hear that I work in politics. I remember I had this one interesting conversation with this one like white guy. He's from the South. It was ridiculous. And so we were talking and it was a pretty good conversation. And he was like, well, why don't you go back to Pakistan first and like help those people before you help like the government here? And I was like, okay, you could take this two ways, right? The whole go back to your country, whatever white man telling you to go back to your country. But also I could like understand sort of like his like line of reasoning almost. Because you're from there, why don't you help them first? Because that's a struggling country. rather than do it here. I was like, I get that. But also at the same time, I reap the benefits of this country. I grew up here. Money was spent on me. Like, tax dollars were spent on teachers who taught me, right? I went to a public university here. I've reaped the benefits of a society, so why would I go back and then take all those resources and then just put that back into a different country? Like, this country gave me so much. So it's like, yeah, I believe that I owe this country equally the same amount, right? And so I want to help them. And of course, like, just people like me, Pakistani female Muslims live in this country, and I want to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, oh, I that makes sense, right? And so people don't realize that when we go back to Pakistan, we feel like not even outsiders, but it's such a culture shock. It's so different.
Yeah.
We relate more with people here
And we've been
than we will ever relate with people
and that's
there.
the thing is, like, we've been to Pakistan. The last time we went, it's been a while, but
like
last
10
time, it's
years
been almost 10
plus,
years.
like,
Yeah, we were
10 plus
in
years, for
high
sure.
school.
Yeah.
The last time we were there, and it's definitely like a trip that's long overdue. When you visiting.
Well, it's like, I was talking again to Mom about this yesterday, and I was saying how, like, when we go back, there's, like, certain customs there, right, that we're not even familiar with because we don't practice them here, right? So we have Mom Baba, who we now speak English with, right? We don't really speak Urdu with our, like, native tongue. And then on top of that, like, they're the most interaction that we have with like, true Pakistani people.
Yeah.
So when you go back to Pakistan, there's, like, customs that you do. So you have to, like, obviously, there's, like, a certain level of respect with older people.
Yeah.
And not to say that we don't have respect for, like, elders, right? But, like, over there's, like, extreme amount.
Yeah.
And so
kind of like a ritualistic way
thing.
of how you
like,
making, like, being in the kitchen while dinner is,
like,
you know,
you have
it's
to
dinner time,
automatically
you have to be,
go there. Yeah.
you know, helping someone cook. You have, you know, there's just like a more, I don't know, it's different, but
It's different, but it's these customs, right? And they're almost like customs in a way where if you don't do it, it's rude, right? Where, like,
one
we're
of my
not
friends,
even aware of it.
But how interesting is this? Like, one of my friends that I was just, like, mentioning before, she is half Pakistani,
Right.
half Mexican.
Yeah.
And when she's with her Pakistani side of the family, she was like, I remember she was over at, you know, it was someone's house, and her grandma was there, and there was a whole bunch of her, like, male cousins
Right.
as well. And her grandma asked her, she's like, hey, like, can you help clean the dishes?
And her grandma's like an old, elder, like,
she's
Pakistani
yeah,
woman, right?
And typically, to avoid conflict, you just kind of
You're like, I'm just
say
gonna
nothing
do it. Yeah.
and you do it. I think this is true, like, across all cultures.
No, totally.
But she was, like, kind of upset because that is true very much of, like, a Pakistani household. The women kind of run around, do the work, and the men are kind of just, like,
Just
relaxed.
sitting around.
And she was like, first of all, she's like, this isn't even my home.
Yeah.
These guys that are playing video games that are finished and are like, it's actually his place. Maybe he should be the one
To
who should be
clean
clean up.
up.
She's like, I think I'm gonna relax, and he should clean up. And she got into this like large argument with her grandma about it. It was like quite contentious.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, she was like, it was ridiculous. But she was like, me even just, you know, speaking against that was such an issue. And I think
That's what I'm
it's
saying.
so
You're not supposed to
emblematic
question
of, like,
elders.
how we feel
Yeah.
when we're asked to do something that is so and we just want to innately, we just feel very like,
You like reject it.
and
Yeah,
you
you're
want
like,
to you want to reject it because you're like, I can understand, like, the
like
you know,
a weird
misogyny
line,
that is
Behind
laced
that.
in this action.
Yes.
And you're like, I don't want to because of that. But for them, they don't, you know, the grandma who's asking you to clean up the dishes doesn't see that.
Oh,
She
totally.
sees, like,
It's
respect
traditional,
and tradition.
right? People
Exactly.
mask this
just
misogynistic
like-
society under tradition, and it's like, yo, we should look at it for
Yeah.
what it is, right? Like, why are men sitting around or like in typical in the Pakistani, like, dinners or get-togethers, men go
Yeah.
first, which is, like, ridiculous,
Men
right?
always get served their food first.
Serve their food first when, like, there's, like, children who should probably
And
be first.
pregnant
or
women.
pregnant women, right? But I'm not saying women should go first, but I'm just saying there's children.
Maybe everyone should just, like,
go together, but you know that's, like, unheard of too.
together.
Anywho, so we've gone way longer than we should have. Gustav has been like, wrap it up, the background. But you know, anywho's, cool. Okay, so that was our second segment, which was I think really productive.
Yeah.
And we're gonna move on to our last segment for today, and it is talking about Muslim women in power and leadership in America. So stay tuned with us, keep watching, and join us in the conversation.